From a highly secure network of top secret locations across North America, this is the midsummer edition of the Spurs Insider. Lots to talk about. We'll get to it shortly. Toot sweet. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by Express News Spurs beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn. Lots happened in the 2 weeks. We took 2 weeks off in the summer. There's a new Spur. There's a couple new Spurs since the last time we spoke. Tom is out in the desert chronicling draft pick Stephon Castle, who looked great for a while and now is done. Tom, where do you want to start? I'm going to start with you because you're checking in from the desert and making sure you're okay. You're healthy. You're getting a lot of fluids. You're hydrating, making sure you're okay. So I'm going to let you take over wherever you want to start with your local Cagers this summer.
All right. Well, let's start with Castle. He played very well against Portland in their first game here. But that's it. That's it for him. In that game, he suffered he took a pretty good spill, got up and kept playing, gave the bench a thumbs up. But the next day, he was ruled out for the rest of summer league with a sprained right wrist. It's minor, nothing to be concerned about. Just a precautionary move, just like playing Wemby 2 games last year in Vegas.
Well, Tom, forget the nuts and bolts, the details that people have already read about in the paper. What did you think of him? What are your impressions of the kid and what you've seen this summer?
He's ready to go. I mean, he's impressed. He's impressed everybody. I was talking to some members of their staff that are pretty high up the food chain, and they just continue to just dismiss any concerns about his shooting, his perimeter shooting. He hit a couple in Sacramento. I think the last game Jeff covered, and then he hit a couple against the Blazers. Mechanics look great. He's assertive, he runs the show as the point guard. Looked great in the pick and roll. Yeah, and as Pop said on that in-game broadcast with interview with ESPN, he should see a lot of playing time. Does that mean he's going to start? I don't think so, but he's going to see a lot of playing time from the get-go.
And probably, Jeff, not limited to the point guard position just because of the way this roster is set up. Correct?
That is correct. I think maybe before Chris Paul came aboard, what you could have looked at Stephon Castle as being the opening day starter at point guard and just rolling him out there and letting him figure all this stuff out, from the jump. With Chris Paul there, obviously Chris Paul is your starting point guard. So they're going to move Castle to the bench, I think, to start from what I understand, to start the season, and he'll probably be playing off the ball at first, and that's what our boy summer league coach Kenny Trevino told me in Sacramento, and probably told Tom in Las Vegas. Is a lot of what they're working on with him right now is his role is going to be a lot different when he gets to the big club. It's going to be an off the ball role to start, not to start the game, but to start his career. Like, he's going to be that probably backup two behind Devin Vassell. Trey Jones is your backup point guard. Yes, there'll be some mix and match lineups where Castle is running the point. There are certainly going to be games this year where Chris Paul is going to not play because he's nearly 40. I mean, he's not going to play 82 games, so there will be an opening for point guard minutes there. But I think Castle's first role, coming into the league is going to be kind of a bench sort of combo guard. And I think that fits him well. It does, like, some old school heads might think that sounds funny, like his one weakness is shooting and you're going to make him a shooting guard, but that's not really the way the league works anymore anyway, with the labels and such. So I'd expect to see him coming off the bench, but eventually he will be their point guard of the future, I think, in the maybe the vein of like a Drew Holiday, who can be on the ball and off the ball and be a great defender and that sort of thing.
But everything he's done out here in Sacramento is just underscored. They're very, very happy with that pick.
He's got very good. The thing that sticks out to me, well, the defense sticks out to me, but we knew that coming in. Just his feel for the game, the way he reads those pick and rolls and makes the right pass is probably ahead of schedule for like a 19-year-old. I don't know if you guys are fans of American football, but it's sort of like a quarterback, like going through his progressions. and the young quarterbacks can't get very far through them. They want to pull the trigger quickly. Castle just has a knack for coming off that pick and roll and making the right pass, whether it's to the roll guy, whether it's to the guy in the corner, whether it's the guy in the opposite corner, whether it's the guy on the wing. And he just plays at a pace that allows those options to unfold in front of him. He does not seem to get hurried. All that stuff is what stuck out to me in Sacramento for a guy that's really young. He's 19 years old, and I thought that was really impressive. With all their usual caveats that it's summer league and this isn't, a full NBA rosters and yada yada.
And Pop talked about his demeanor, serious demeanor, and in interviewing him, he's a pleasant enough interview, but he knows how to use a period, which is kind of impressive. He doesn't go on and he says what he has to say and it's on to the next question. Kind of Tim Duncan-esque in that sense, I think.
The headline for the podcast: Tom Orsborn compares Stephon Castle to Tim Duncan.
Because he knows how to use a period.
Because he knows how to use a period. His dad learned that as Tim Duncan's teammate at Wake Forest 30 years ago. For the past 30 years in the NBA draft, we've kind of overlooked results, right? We've been conditioned to the fact that you draft talent because going back to the high school, when the high schoolers started going in the NBA draft, it was just like it did. What the college doesn't matter as much, but college still sort of matters. Like Stephon Castle's a guy who just played for a national championship and was basically the point guard on a national championship team. I know that they didn't involve him in all the sets the way typical point guards do, but that's in a weird way almost underrated now that he has that type of big game experience. He's not going to be wide-eyed by Sacramento or Vegas Summer League after what he's been through. I think that'll carry over to the regular season as well.
Not that they need to hear it from me, but like watching him in Summer League, watching Stephon Castle in Summer League, just makes me realize UConn has a really great basketball program. Like he comes in probably better taught than, this is probably obvious. He comes in better taught coming from UConn than he would if he'd have gone to a host of other schools. And you can see it, you can tell it. A lot of what we like about him and his high IQ is just ingrained, natural. But you have to think going through a program like UConn really prepared him in an NBA way. I think the UConn program is really it's proving to be a good training ground for NBA players, and they seem to have a leg up when they get there. And if Dan Hurley wants to send me a check right now, I'll accept it for that.
Well, one thing that the UConn program is known for among like the basketball junkie crowd is just the way they've innovated on the offensive end and the complexity of some of their sets. And in a way, like I mentioned on the last podcast, I think that I talked to Danny Hurley in, where was the draft? Brooklyn?
As always, yeah.
It's in Brooklyn. And he sort of joked when I asked him if they were going to, if he expected Pop to steal sets from him. He was semi-joking, but I think in some ways pretty serious about how NBA teams can't be as creative as he can because they only have 24 seconds instead of 30. They have a lot of layers to some of the stuff they were running at UConn in those 30-second shot clocks. And in a way, like it's almost simpler in the NBA for a guy like Castle who had to learn all that stuff. So yeah, I think Jeff's onto something there with the way certain programs prepare NBA players. You can go back like several years ago to when the Spurs took Devin Vassell in the first round. And people were saying how like Leonard Hamilton at Florida State has a knack for getting guys ready for the pros. Some programs just are that way. And it's kind of cool to see that unfold. Donovan Clingan could be a good one in Portland this year too. Another is Stephon's college teammate. We have not convened the Spurs Insider podcast since a pretty big trade. The Spurs traded Devontae Graham. Is that the headline here?
Gonna miss him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Good one.
Devontae was the man. Devontae was awesome. But I guess did I misspeak there? Devontae Graham wasn't traded. Devontae Graham was waived to enable to create the cap space needed for what may turn out to be one of the heists of the offseason. In that, just think about this, like how messed up the Chicago Bulls organization is. They've dug themselves into this salary cap misery where they weren't going to sign DeMar DeRozan, wanted to get something for him in a sign and trade after not trading him before now, like basically letting him walk away for nothing. And you need to sign and trade him to get out from under this salary cap hell. And they're able to pull that off, but they need a third team to come in and get the good stuff. And that third team was the Spurs stepping up to get the good stuff. The Bulls trade DeMar DeRozan to Sacramento, get that salary off the books. Sacramento, to make that trade happen, has to, because they're over the salary cap, has to get rid of
all of this has been in the paper. Tell us what you think about Harrison Barnes.
Look who's taking your job.
That's well played, Tom. But the Kings have to get rid of have to make salary cap room. They get rid of Harrison Barnes. The Bulls aren't able to take Harrison Barnes back. The Bulls really aren't able to get the biggest draft prize in this three-way deal. The Spurs get Harrison Barnes to be a veteran in this locker room that the Spurs need this year. They get another pick swap. They're mini pick swaps in what could be the Victor Wembanyama peak. And the Bulls ended up getting nothing, basically. I think they got a second rounder.
The Bulls got Raekwon Gray.
Yeah.
And then
and subsequently waived him.
Yes.
But just another example of, and this, if this sounds homerish, so be it. Like that, we're not being nearly as homerish as some national media members who keep pointing out over and over again that the Spurs keep pulling the wool over other GM's eyes in some of these deals. You go back to the Atlanta trade for DeJounte Murray, that's turned into a hugely one-sided deal in favor of the Spurs, who control the next three Atlanta Hawks drafts. Spurs did pretty well, I think, to get we can talk now in retrospect about the draft night trade that the Spurs pulled off, trading the number 8 overall pick for a first rounder and a first round swap with the Timberwolves, and created the space to add Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul. If they don't make that trade, you're not able to add both. There's a lot of picks, a lot of swaps. The Spurs keep getting this stuff that other GMs are happy to give them. And I mentioned this before, but I think part of it is just like, that's the advantage of never firing dudes. And a big part of being a Spurs fan these days is like, why don't we ever fire anybody? Why don't we ever fire the coach? Why don't we ever fire the GM? They don't do anything. Well, this is part of the continuity. The benefits of continuity is you're able to pull off these deals. You're able to ask for stuff 7 years down the line. And other GMs are like, they need to show results right away, tomorrow, next year, or they're going to lose their jobs. And maybe this doesn't become much, all these swaps that are lined up in 2029, 2030, 2031, but the Spurs sure are collecting a lot of stuff that could come in use when they're hitting their salary cap issues in the height of the Victor Wembanyama era.
And I think Harrison Barnes is going to help them too in the short term. I mean, he's 30, he's 32. He's probably not what he was when he was with the Warriors winning that championship. But he's also not washed. So I think he'll help them. He'll be one of their better 3-point shooters. A bigger body at that spot. Probably will start, I think, in a lot of lineups, but could also see him coming off the bench as the season goes on. And then all the intangibles we talk about with Chris Paul, just being that locker room voice, guy who's been there, done that. Unlike Chris Paul, has a championship ring to show for it.
Has played in 82 games in back-to-back years too, even at age 32. Big
pop guy, dating back to the Team USA.
World Cup.
Yeah, there's stuff there. So he's gonna help a lot. If yeah, I guess it's my role to be the dark cloud on this podcast. Like the Spurs might have just cost themselves the Bulls' first round pick next year, though.
Yeah, well,
by helping making the Bulls worse.
But the Bulls were going to be worse regardless. I mean, they traded out Alex Caruso and what seems like a kind of
are we just
curious deal. They were going to lose DeRozan regardless.
Well, the Spurs,
the Spurs probably aren't going to get that pick. That's top 10 protected for those at home who don't have their spreadsheets in front of them.
I saw some NBA. Well, since we're all talking about Dryland, I'm going off the rails here, but I saw some NBA type talking about Charlotte looks like they could make a play for a playoff seed in the East. The East is kind of weak, and they're on the come up. That would help the Spurs because the Spurs have that pick if it's not in the lottery. But man,
that's gravy.
Charlotte, why do you do that?
Yeah. I pretty much discounted that. I think most people have discounted that pick. The Spurs aren't getting that. The Spurs aren't going to get that Charlotte pick.
So they're really only going to have 2 picks next year in that draft that we all thought was really loaded.
Atlanta's pick and the Spurs' own pick,
which is one more than
the Bulls pick. If it falls below 10, it probably won't. The Charlotte pick, if it falls below 14, which it probably won't, it'll probably be 2. Still pretty good. Unless the Spurs choose over the next month, this is another topic to get into. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because I don't think it's going to happen. But until we get to August 6th, which is a big date in the NBA calendar this summer, I suppose there's still a possibility that the Spurs or some other team could trade for Lauri Markkanen of the Utah Jazz. I just think that's still far-fetched at this point just because Danny Ainge is going to ask for so much. The Spurs can wait a year on that if they need to. I think Markkanen's a great fit with this team. But on August 6th, the Jazz can renegotiate and extend his contract. And if they do that on August 6th, then he will not be eligible to be traded for 6 months, which is the trade deadline day during the year. So that would put that on hold for at least 6 months if they do that. Anything to add there?
It just doesn't sound like Utah is chomping at the bit to trade him right now. And so it's going to have to take some kind of Godfather-like offer to make it happen. I don't think the Spurs are really looking to make Godfather offers right now.
I agree. The Jeff was in Sacramento when Tom and I got the opportunity to speak to the 2 new veterans in the locker room, the 2 new grown-ups. And Tom, I don't know about you, but I was just I was sort of inspired, encouraged, felt good about being able to talk to grown-ups again. Like I'm excited about that to talk to a couple plus 30 dudes in the locker room again. So I don't feel quite as old as I am. Harrison and Chris both seem like fun guys to be around.
Yeah, Chris Paul was that was a very good start for him. It was a good interview. And yeah, Barnes, he's a class act, and going back to his playing, he's 32, but he had some very good games last season. Some really good scoring games. He averaged 12 points, but he had some games where he really exploded, including a career high against his former team, the Warriors. So I think there's a lot of meat left on the bones there of Harrison Barnes.
And legitimately wanted to be in San Antonio. He confirmed confirmed the local columnist at that press conference that he did waive his 10% trade kicker. He was entitled to almost $2 million extra if he got traded. And to make that work, he said, nope, I want to come to San Antonio. Well, I'll waive that $1.9 million, whatever it was, because he wanted to play for Pop. He wanted to be part of this rebuild. Was excited about coming here. Cynics would say that he's going to save a little bit in state income tax in the process. But who wants to be a cynic in times like these? We have too many cynics.
Enough of those.
That's my bread and butter, man.
But it was kind of interesting that the 32-year-old during that press conference that day when they were introduced last week, seemed more on board with the old man mentorship thing than the 39-year-old who, while Chris Paul will be a great veteran teammate as he always has been at every stop he's been to, including Oklahoma City, where he was kind of in a situation like he is now, where he mentored the guys below him. That he's not here because he wanted to mentor people. Tom, he wants to hoop, and I found that refreshingly honest. That it was like, I like Pop, I like Wemby, I like the chance to be a part of something, but the reason I'm here is because I want to hoop, and this team gave me a chance to hoop.
I mean, you can do both.
Yeah, you can. But he stressed the latter. Like he just wants to play, and he wants to play to win. And I think that's sort of more than just having someone lecture you.
Oh, sure.
From one locker to the other.
Sure, we talked about that a lot.
That's exactly the example that these young Spurs need.
Right.
It's not a guy who wants to be their dad, as Chris Paul said. A guy who wants to go out there and try to win.
Yeah, it's got to be show and tell. And it's like there's room on rosters for those Udonis Haslem types that are been there forever.
Devontae Graham types.
Yeah. But aren't going to play. But at the end of the day, you also need those people in leadership roles that are going to do something on the court. There is a lot to be said for some show and tell.
Yeah. And that's going to be Chris, I think. And it's not all going to be, story time. It's going to be, let's get out there and win this game. And especially as we mentioned before, I think in the last podcast, the last 2 minutes of games, it's going to be show. It's not going to be tell.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Which is what the Spurs need. Do we want to do, before we wind down for the podcast, you want to do some lineup talk? Like what's your starting lineup, Jeff McDonald, if you're the coach, your rotation as we now sit? I think there's 2 open roster spots left at the time of this recording. I expect those 2 roster spots might be filled by guys who were on the roster before.
Right.
But I'll leave that to you. Go ahead and give me your bullet points as to who you like out there on opening night, who you like in your rotation. There you go.
I think you're probably going to see Chris Paul at the point. Probably Devin Vassell at the 2.
Oh.
Possibly Jeremy Sohan at the 3, or if you want to call that Harrison Barnes, whatever. Barnes at the 3.
I think those are interchangeable.
Yeah.
Sohan will guard the better opponent, the front court opponent.
And of course, the 5th starter, Sandro Mamush.
Of course.
Mamu was out here today working out.
Been around. No, Victor is my 5th starter there.
Oh, okay.
Wembanyama, just to be clear.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
And you got your Trey Jones coming off the bench.
Yeah,
at point guard. Castle.
Champagne probably will be involved in there.
You got your Zach Collins.
You
got your. What does this mean for? What does this offseason mean for folks, not so old folks like your Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley?
They are on the clock, boy.
Yeah,
those 2 are on the clock. Show me something, or you might not be here.
This is a September topic, and I don't want to waste all our September topics because we could be scraping the bottom of the barrel in September.
Those 2 guards, there's basically 2 guys in front of them in the rotation now that weren't there last year, in Chris Paul and Stephon Castle. So
and the options on not this coming year, but 2 seasons from now, that option has to be decided on by October 1st, I believe.
It's
or October 31st. Yeah. So that you're right. Those 2 guys, and again, I'm blowing all our September topics now, but the summer of 2025 is the big free agency summer, the draft summer, all that. You might not want to have $4 million guaranteed to Blake Wesley that summer. You might decide this fall that hey, we're going to let you go into free agency next year, and we're going to clear up. We're just going to take that extra $4 million off our books. It's going to be a big offseason for him. Tom, did you say he was one of the guys out there?
Yeah, today, after the Summer League guys got done, Trey Jones, Julian, Malachi, Blake, Sandro, and a late arriving, but very eager to get out there, Zach Collins all did some scrimmaging. Mitch Johnson was out there.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Sandro's still technically is he restricted?
Right. Yes, he is. That is correct. And,
so,
yeah,
I suspect. I think according to the official roster status as we're recording this week, there are 2 spots open. But that's not counting Mamu. That's not counting who else could be on there. Bassi could be re-signed.
Yeah.
Are you counting Harrison Ingram?
Not counting Harrison Ingram. Still does not have
he might be a two-way guy though.
He might be a two-way. I still would not be shocked if we had a reunion with Jetty Osman. He seems to have a role on this team in the second unit if he does. And the Spurs have, to get into the nitty-gritty minutia of salary cap, the Spurs have a room exemption to use still, that somebody like Osman could
right
be signed as part of. So yeah, you throw out those names: Mamu, Osman, Bassi, Harrison Ingram. I think you probably get a couple of those guys to fill those last couple spots, and the roster looks kind of the bottom part of the roster looks kind of similar to how it did last year. You never know; there could be somebody else out there.
They really
Tom, you mentioned they were kind of in on Haywood Highsmith for a while.
Yes. Yes.
That didn't quite work out. I don't think that was as possible after they acquired Harrison and Chris Paul. But
early on it fizzled because he wanted a couple of years, a little more security. Yeah. They were talking 1 year. But Sidi Sissoko,
there you go.
He's been a bright spot out here, as Pop mentioned during that in-game interview with ESPN. So yeah, they like what they're seeing from him. He's progressed, making some great, really been great his playmaking out here, but the defense has been solid. So he's in the mix for more time, I think.
Yeah, he's got a good body, unlike Kim Birch, who had a bad body. Sidi Sissoko has a good body.
Oh my gosh!
To review for the listeners out there who haven't been with us for years, is that 2 years ago? It's been a while. After the Spurs acquired Kim Birch in a deal with
that Pirtle trade,
Toronto Raptors, and I think we were on the roads. Jeff and I were on the road somewhere before a game, asking Pop about the status of Kim Birch, and Pop said, "Oh, he's not going to play. What, is he injured? No, it was something along the lines of, does he need to get his?" There were rumors that he was going to get he needed a visa to be cleared because it was about an international thing,
right?
Coming from Canada to the United States. Was it a visa thing? Is it a paperwork thing? Pop said, no, he's got a bad body.
Meaning he was injured, not that he's like, flabby or whatever. Right. Just meaning,
but that is
some sort of.
That is a joke that will never get old. Kim Birch has a bad body.
It wasn't fat shaming,
or was it? We don't.
I mean, but also like Boris Diaw got all kinds of work done with a bad body, so
yeah,
there can be done.
Where did you see CD's at that point in his career, like many Spurs draft picks over the past decade or so, where he's put in his year on the I-35 shuttle back and forth from the Austin Spurs to the San Antonio Spurs? These guys do that for a year, and then they're kind of ready to make that leap in year 2. If he makes that leap, where do you see him fitting in as like a 3-4 type?
Yes.
Pop mentioned 3.
Yeah, but probably needs to shoot a little better. Like many of the Spurs wings, he needs to shoot a little better.
But really good at a lot of the other things. Like a lot of those. Don't we say that about all of them? Really good at this and that, but can't do the part where the ball goes in the basket.
Well, we'll see.
I'm actually like high on him as a second round pick. Like I'd like to see what becomes of him. I think he's got a lot of upside.
I agree with you. I agree
I
with you.
got some. Go ahead.
Well, we're out. Go ahead. I was just about to wind down and say that anybody who wanted to read more about CD Sissoko could do so on expressnews.com. By the time this podcast hits your digital players, your earbuds, I think Tom Orsborn from Las Vegas, Nevada, will have quite a breakdown on CD Sissoko's summer. It also in the Dead Tree edition of the San Antonio Express News. So that's something to look forward to. What do you want to add, Jeff?
What I was going to say, I came across some interesting tidbits in Sacramento that are neither here nor there, but maybe they're interesting. The summer league is really good for us to go to because you end up just in a room or in a gym with a bunch of the staffers who know things, and it's a relaxed situation. You can just shoot the breeze, and sometimes you get information that way. And I want to talk about the draft, the Castle draft. This isn't information that helps anybody now, but I just found it interesting the way the Spurs viewed the top of that draft. And it goes like this. If they had the first pick, and this surprised me because we spend so much time talking about the draft and we kind of didn't really talk about this name of it, but if they'd had the top pick, they would have absolutely taken Alex Sarr with the top pick.
Alex Sarr, who went to the Washington Wizards.
We wondered about his fit and blah, blah, blah. They thought if they ended up with Alex Sarr, all the others, they pictured him as like a bigger, better Jeremy Sohan that maybe they could teach to do the offensive stuff. Like the defense and the mobility would be just worth it, especially in a draft like this where everyone has flaws. If they'd had the second pick, or if the choice had been Castle or Reed Shepherd at 4, they would have gone Reed Shepherd probably just because of the shooting. And then Castle was the guy that I guess probably would have been third on their board.
So they got the third guy on their board at pick number 4,
and not a lot of interest in Risa Shea that went first overall. Like it'd be interesting. I don't know what they'd have done if those first 3 guys had been gone 1 through 2, 3, and Risa Shea was there at number 4, but weren't quite sold on him. I don't think so. That was interesting, but I was a little surprised that they were. It was like a no-brainer that you take Sarr number 1 if they had the pick.
Risa Shea was a guy who really wrote 2 months before the draft. You look at the mocks and he was like 10, 8, 9, 10, then in that range. And he maybe it wasn't 2 months. It was not long before the draft. During last season, I don't think anybody thought he was number 1.
Right.
And he had kind of this surge because of the way he finished his season overseas. And I tend to be kind of skeptical of those overnight risers. And sounds like the Spurs might have been too. Go ahead, Tom.
CD was all over him Sunday.
Yeah.
He shot 4 of 12, 1 of 7 from 3-point range. And CD told me today, hey, I love the guy. He's a Frenchman, but this is a grown man's league. And I had to introduce him to the NBA to make him better.
And maybe there's a thing with the Spurs assessment or that thought where, the Spurs it's maybe wishful thinking, maybe in a way, or wishful optimism, because the Spurs need Atlanta to be bad for a while. And so if Atlanta has maybe flubbed that pick, that's good for the Spurs. And so, there's just a natural part of you, if you work for the team, that's sort of rooting for that to not pan out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good
stuff. Not to split hairs, the Spurs would benefit from Atlanta being it would be great for the Spurs if Atlanta was bad for a while. I'm not sure they need them to be bad for a while. Correct. Yeah.
I need to be more precise with my language.
Yeah.
I should have plugged that into AI first.
Yeah, if you would have just done your AI homework, let the AI do it for you.
Well, I'm not going to make it too big a deal out of it, but we did have a training on that today, and I was surprised, shocked. I guess you guys haven't done it yet. Maybe I'll just AI. It's not just Allen Iverson sitting in a room answering your questions.
It's not?
No, I was shocked.
Huh.
It's actually some computer gizmo.
Wow, I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, take the training.
Well, maybe I will, and maybe by the next time we have this podcast, I will be trained on. You're saying it's not Allen Iverson.
It is not Allen Iverson.
The only thing I want
who is it?
I told you
I wanted to know
it's just the
about this
computer
topic
gets
is how long did it take? How long was the training?
Well, we'll get back to that off air.
Okay.
It was an hour and a half.
All right.
Okay. Well, after an hour and a half, you know all about AI. You know that it's not the former point guard of the Philadelphia 76ers.
You know that if AI had a better supporting cast, he would have won a title in 2001.
Huh. Well, okay, let me ask you this.
You should ask AI about AI.
As part of your training, was there practice?
You know what? We did not talk about practice.
In the AI training, you did not talk about practice?
I did not talk about practice. I was also confused. I was shocked. I thought in AI training, we would talk about practice.
Well, man, I can't wait to go to that training.
Not a game, just practice.
Well, by our next podcast, Tom and I might be better prepared to discuss this. We will discuss maybe some more additions. There's 2 more roster spots to fill. Maybe a shocking trade. Who knows where the summer will take us? Actually, I'll leave you with this. My next podcast will not be recorded from a secure location in North America. It will be, I'm going to have to find me a highly secure, top secret location on another continent. I'll leave it to you that way. That I don't know if that's going to make the listeners more excited or less excited to listen to it. But the next time you hear me, it'll be in a secure location outside of North America. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.